All right, welcome. This is Regis. I made a fairly brief video. This is the third portion of ETA this week. This is Defense. And I know a lot of people are working on their Perigone medal, trying to get the Ensign bundle completed. And this has been a bit of a pain point. So I just rolled in. I'm on a Hildryn build. This was designed by, the build is designed by Ninjase or Ninjase. I'm not sure how they pronounce their name, but you can find it on Overframe and it's been discussed. This build is called the Aegis General Use Steel Path Hildryn. I've made a couple little tweaks. For example, this build calls for Arcane Velocity, but I went with, I believe it's Arcane Intention. I'll have the build that I used at the end of the video, but when you roll in, be careful. Those two gremlin-y looking red pools, those are one of the big difficulties, one of the big problem points with this encounter. They will drain your health. If you've run a lot of defense or you played the game a lot, you know that those things are very annoying. And I used Arcane Intention because it gives Hildryn, whenever Hildryn uses an ability, it gives a little boost of health. So I wanted to have that in my back pocket. I don't use, even though the build calls for it or it's centered on Aegis, I don't really use it very much here. I am using mainly Haven and then Pillage. And if you will read the description of how this build works, you definitely want to spam Pillage. Whenever you hear that sound that it is triggered, you'll see it's about 3 seconds there. Hit it again. And that's going to help you with ad control. You also saw when I came in and began the encounter, I threw down a bunch of buddies. And you want an Ancient Protector if you have one. I use a Vapor Spectre of Dante, which I love. And my internet connection was a little bit problematic at points in this encounter, but thankfully the game allowed me to stay logged in. But in any event, Dante is very helpful. You'll get an overshield, a little bit of overguard every now and again. You don't really necessarily need it, but Dante is a nice, simple Spectre to use. And I use an Osprey. I also have my on-call online lich named Kill3, who you will see a bit later. Now, you have a couple of options. These first few waves, the upper level, this is a larger map than the one below. And one of the challenges with this, and one of the things that really causes your range to get stretched, is you have to get out to those Harbinger balloons. Some of them are turrets, and they can do some damage to Flare. And you'll want to deal with them. You have to deal with them really to finish the waves. But the tricky thing, of course, if you've been attempting this, you know the hard thing is protecting Flare, keeping Flare upright, but then also dealing with the ads that are at the edges of the map. So the point I was initially going to make, this is a larger map, these first few waves, and I think it's a bit more tricky than when you get to the smaller map below. But you're going to see, I'm basically just going back and forth, taking out ads as I see them, trying to avoid those red pools, letting my buddies do the work, as much of the work as they're gonna do, spamming Pillage, but staying in range too because I need Haven to stay on Flare. Now, you'll see that Flare's health dropped from the 96,000 range to 63,000. It's gonna go up. I don't make any more mistakes, but that's because a couple of ads got through and started to melee them. So it's really easy to make a little mistake. You've got to keep, and as you can see, when I'm out here trying to deal with those Harbingers, my range gets stretched and I don't have that cover on Flare. So you've got to pick your points when you're going to go out to the edges of the map and deal with those. But it's a really nice build. I take no credit for it at all. It's one that when I was trying to get this done, I was working on my final encounter for the Ensign bundle. I was looking for some different ideas. When I initially cleared this, though, I used Trinity. I like Trinity a lot. She also has some pretty nice healing options and protect options, but I made use of more of the buddies for Trinity that filled in some of the gaps. But if you don't have a good range of options for buddies and you do have a Hildryn or a Hildryn Prime, this is a nice build to use. It's going to help you get through this. Get that final medal and final bit of flair, if you will. So, as you can see, just constant motion, avoiding those health drain pools, which if anybody from DE is listening, I cannot stand that particular enemy. I wish you hadn't come up with that, but from a ludological point of view, from a game design point of view, it's probably a nice addition to the enemy repertoire, but I find them really annoying. Okay, so you can see that Haven is allowing Flare to keep that nice overshield. Or shield, I should say. It's not overguard. So here's the risk. I've got to come out. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why not just stay around the stage and take these out? The modifier this week, if you're trying to get this done this week, you have to be to killing that. I think it's within 50 meters. So you can look at the actual number when you start the encounter, when you start ETA. But those Perigone balloons, blimps, gas bags, they're not that big of a deal. You can shoot those from any distance. It's the Harbingers you can see that are a bit of... See, I tried to shoot it there, but it was immune because I've got to get closer. But the light blue bar, Perigone blimps, balloons, you can take those out relatively easily. But if you've got this build working and you've dropped down to this second lower level, you're going to have a little easier time. The map is more compact. You might think instinctually, well, a smaller map maybe makes things more difficult, but it's easier to keep Haven in place, so the ads aren't going to damage Flare at all. And you see that my buddies, Spectres, they're all doing their job and helping control ads. That protector is really nice. If you've been doing some research, if you've been struggling with this, you've been trying to figure out a way to get your ETA solo done. I saw on the Warframe subreddit, for example, that there's been some discussion of using protectors, which I think is great advice if you have some. You just have to have the blueprints and then you have to manufacture them in your foundry. So I'm just running pretty compact laps around the stage area, and you can see that Flare/Temple is maintaining health mid 60,000s, which is fine. They would be in the 90s if I hadn't made that little bit of an early mistake, but anything above 0 is going to get you through this. So, but I'm just running a circle. I know, you can run clockwise, counterclockwise. It doesn't really matter. The point is to stay in motion, avoid the health drain. Which, if you stay still, that health drain, it's going to work its way through even your pillage Haven combo. That's not going to save you. So you really do need to stay on the move. You can use Aegis if you want to use Hildryn's 4. I don't have the Balefire to the place that it needs to be really effective, but that can also be powerful. That's why Arcane Velocity is recommended in the build. I don't think for this specific challenge that Velocity is you know, unless you're going to use Balefire. But you can see I want a little more mobility. You can still move using the 4. If you decide that you want to use Aegis Storm, but you're not quite as mobile. So this is the last wave, and just running circles and shooting ads, taking things out as I see them. As long as you're able to stay within range of Haven, with Haven, if you're able to stay within range of Flare, they're not going to have any damage issues. So. Key is to stay upright, stay out of the health drain pools. I know those ads have a specific name, it's just not following at the moment. You'll also get some ads that stay out on the edges. They'll stay up on the balconies, whatever they're called, and they'll shoot at Flare from distance. So you'll need to deal with those too if your Spectres or buddies don't get to them. Yeah, gotta go get that. Some of them will hide behind the columns down here, but they're not too big of a deal to contend with. All right, mission complete. This is not my first completion of the week. I just made this video for demonstrative purposes. So anyway, here's the build. I'll give you the link to it. Prime Sure-Footed I use instead of Cunning Drift. And then you can see I use Arcane Aegis, but I used Arcane Intention instead of Velocity. So this is 98% Ninja Ace's build, but I did make a couple of little tweaks. I used Felarx or Felarx, I don't know how you like to pronounce it, but it's a nice weapon for dealing with things. And then a New Core. New Core is handy for the Exterminate and Legacyte section, the first two, which really are not that tough. It's the defense portion of ETA this week. If you're trying to solo it, that's really the difficulty, so. I think you'll have a fairly easy time. Now, I used one of the Robo Dogs with Null Audit. I wanted to get that little bit of Eximus. And here I'm showing you some of the drones and buddies that I used. Shield Osprey Spectre is nice. If you have the Stalker, that's a good one too. So this is a good build. All credit to Ninja Ace for the build, but this is what I would recommend if you're trying to get this challenge done. Good luck.